My hands shake as I apply lipstick in the rearview mirror of my Honda Civic, the same coral shade I've worn for 30 years. The parking lot of Mama Rosa's Italian restaurant stretches before me, filled with cars that look newer than mine, shinier, like their owners have more confidence about stepping into the unknown at 67 than I do. I shouldn't be here. That's what my daughter Caroline would say if she knew about tonight. Mom, you met him on a senior dating app. He could be anyone. But she doesn't understand that after 5 years of widowhood, the silence in my house has become so thick, I sometimes find myself talking to my dead husband's coffee mug just to hear a voice in the kitchen. The man I'm meeting calls himself Robert on silverconnections.com. His profile photo shows kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a smile that reminds me of someone I can't quite place. We've been messaging for 3 weeks now, carefully circling each other with polite questions about grandchildren and favorite movies and whether we prefer morning walks or evening ones. He writes in complete sentences, uses proper punctuation, and mentioned that he plays piano, details that somehow matter more at our age than they ever did when I was 25 and thought love was just about racing hearts and stolen kisses. I check my watch. 6:15. I'm early, as always, a habit that drove my late husband Frank crazy, but that I can't seem to shake. Better safe than sorry, Margaret, I whisper to myself, using the voice Frank used to imitate when he teased me about arriving everywhere 10 minutes ahead of schedule. The restaurant's exterior glows warm and inviting, with tiny white lights strung along the awning and the scent of garlic bread drifting through the evening air. I chose this place because it's public but not too crowded, the kind of establishment where conversations can happen without shouting over music meant for people 40 years younger than us. As I walk toward the entrance, my sensible black flats clicking against the pavement, I catch my reflection in the glass door. The woman looking back at me is a stranger in some ways, silver-haired where I used to be auburn, lines mapping decades of laughter and worry around green eyes that Frank once said looked like sea glass. But I still recognize something of the girl who used to dance in her bedroom to Motown records, who believed in happy endings and second chances. The hostess is young enough to be my granddaughter, all bright smile and bouncing ponytail. Good evening, table for one? Actually, I'm meeting someone, reservation under Robert Martinez. The name feels foreign on my tongue. We haven't exchanged last names yet, but I pieced his together from a story he told about his grandson's soccer team. Right this way. She leads me through the dimly lit dining room, past couples leaning over candlelit tables and families celebrating what looks like a birthday. I follow the rhythm of her steps, trying to calm my breathing. This is just dinner, just conversation, just two people who've lived long enough to know that loneliness is heavier than pride. The table is tucked in a corner booth with burgundy leather seats that have seen better decades, but still hold their charm. Your date will be right with you, the hostess chirps, and I want to correct her. It's not a date, it's a meeting, an introduction, a maybe, but she's already gone, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the breadbasket. I order a glass of wine, something I never would have done on a first anything when I was younger, but at 67, I've earned the right to calm my nerves however I choose. The Chianti arrives quickly, deep red and smooth, and I take a small sip while scanning the restaurant entrance for a man in his 70s with wire-rimmed glasses and kind eyes. 6:25. He's late, but not late enough to worry about yet. I pull out my phone and reread our last exchange from this morning. Robert, looking forward to tonight, Margaret. I'll be wearing a blue button-down and probably looking as nervous as I feel. Me, blue is my favorite color. I'll be in black, trying not to fidget too much. Robert, well, fidget together. See you at 6:30. The memory of typing those words makes me smile despite my anxiety. There's something sweetly honest about admitting nervousness at our age, when we should theoretically have figured out how to be smooth and confident by now. A man enters the restaurant, and my heart stutters. Gray hair, glasses, blue shirt, but he's too tall, too broad, and when the hostess greets him, he says he's meeting his wife. Not Robert, then. I return to my wine and try to remember the last time I felt this particular combination of hope and terror. It was 1978, I realize with a start, the night Frank proposed at Louie's Diner, back when it was still standing on 5th Street. I'd known it was coming. We'd been talking about marriage for months, but when he slid that small velvet box across the Formica table, my hands shook so hard I could barely open it. Funny how the important moments in life always feel the same, regardless of the decades between them. The restaurant door chimes again, and this time I know. Something in my chest recognizes him before my mind catches up, a flutter of familiarity that makes no sense until he turns toward my corner of the dining room and I see his profile fully illuminated by the soft lighting. The wine glass slips from my fingers, hitting the table with a sharp clink that draws looks from neighboring diners. Because walking toward me, moving with the careful gait of a man whose knees have carried him through 7 decades of living, is not Robert Martinez from the dating app. It's Bobby Reeves. Bobby Reeves, who kissed me under the bleachers at Roosevelt High School in 1974. Bobby Reeves, who wrote me letters when he went to Vietnam and I went to nursing school. Bobby Reeves, who broke my heart into 1,000 pieces when he came back different, distant, unable to settle into the life we'd planned together. Bobby Reeves, who disappeared from my life so completely that I eventually convinced myself I dreamed our entire relationship. He stops at my table, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the candlelight, and smiles the same crooked smile that made me fall in love with him 48 years ago. "Hello, Maggie," he says, using the nickname only he ever called me. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize me." I can't speak, can't breathe, can't do anything but stare at this ghost from my past who's apparently been hiding behind the name Robert Martinez on a senior dating website, who somehow found me again after all these years. He slides into the booth across from me, moving carefully but with purpose. I know this is a shock. I know you probably have questions. Questions? The word comes out as barely a whisper. "Bobby, I thought you were dead." His laugh is soft, tinged with sadness. Not dead, just lost for a while, a long while. He reaches across the table, his fingers stopping just short of touching mine. "I've been looking for you for years, Maggie, ever since I finally got my head straight, ever since I realized what I'd thrown away." The restaurant continues buzzing around us, servers delivering plates of pasta, other couples deep in their own conversations, but I feel suspended in time, caught between the girl I was and the woman I've become. This man sitting across from me is both stranger and intimate friend, his face mapped with lines I don't recognize, but his eyes still holding the warmth that once made me believe in forever. "How?" I managed to ask. "How did you find me?" "Technology," he says with a rueful smile. "Amazing what you can discover on the internet when you're determined enough. I found your Frank's obituary first." "I'm sorry, Maggie. He seemed like a good man." The mention of Frank sends a complicated twist through my stomach. Grief, yes, but it's also something like guilt, as if the mere presence of Bobby somehow dishonors my late husband's memory. He was, I say firmly, he was a very good man. "I'm glad," Bobby's voice is sincere. "I'm glad you were happy. You deserved that." The simple statement undoes something in me, some knot of old anger I didn't realize I was still carrying. This was supposed to be a safe dinner with a stranger, a gentle re-entry into the possibility of companionship. Instead, I'm face to face with the first man I ever loved, the one who taught me that hearts can break so thoroughly you think you'll never breathe right again. Our server appears, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who seems to sense the weight of our moment. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asks Bobby. "Coffee, please. Black." He looks at me. "And maybe we should order some food? I have a feeling we're going to be here a while." I nod, though I can't imagine eating anything right now. We order automatically. Chicken parmesan for him, lasagna for me. The kind of comfort food that requires no thought. When the server leaves, we're alone again with 48 years of silence stretching between us. "Start from the beginning," I say, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Tell me where you've been, Bobby. Tell me why you left without saying goodbye." He takes off his glasses, cleaning them with a deliberation that tells me he's stalling, gathering courage. "I came back from Vietnam, broken, Maggie. Not physically, at least not in ways people could see, but inside." He shakes his head. "I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate, couldn't imagine building a life with you when I felt like I was drowning every day." I remember that time, the months after his return, when he seemed to look through me instead of at me, when conversations felt like speaking to someone underwater. I'd tried to understand, to be patient, but at 22, I didn't have the words for trauma or PTSD or the invisible wounds that wars leave behind. I thought if I just disappeared, you'd move on, find someone better, someone who could give you the life you deserved. His voice cracked slightly. "I was so young, Maggie, so stupid. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was just protecting myself from having to admit how lost I was." Our food arrives, steaming plates that fill the space between us with the comforting smell of tomatoes and cheese. We eat slowly, mechanically, the conversation continuing in stops and starts around bites of pasta and sips of wine. "I spent years drifting," he tells me. "Odd jobs, different cities. I was in Seattle for a while, then Phoenix. I drank too much, made bad choices, hurt people who tried to help me." He pauses, setting down his fork. "I got married twice, both disasters. Both times I was trying to find something I'd left behind in that small town with a red-headed girl who believed I was worth saving." The words hit like small stones thrown at a window, each one cracking something open in me. I think of Frank, solid and dependable Frank, who courted me with patience and built our life together brick by brick. I loved him deeply, truly, but it was a different love, mature and steady, without the wild pulse of possibility that Bobby had awakened in me. "What changed?" I ask. "What made you start looking for me?" "Sobriety," he says simply. 15 years ago, I finally got clean. Really clean, not just dry. And in therapy and meetings, I kept coming back to the same regret, the what if that haunted everything else. He looks directly at me, and I see the boy I loved still living in his weathered face. "I started looking for you then, but you were married, had a family. I didn't want to disrupt that. But you kept looking. I kept hoping. And when I found Frank's obituary..." He trails off, as if admitting to monitoring my life from afar might be crossing some line. "When did you join Silver Connections?" 6 months ago. "I saw your profile 3 weeks ago and nearly deleted my account." He laughs, but it's shaky. "Margaret Patterson, 67, widowed, loves reading and gardening. Same green eyes in your photo, same smile, just older, wiser maybe." I think about my own profile, carefully crafted to present the best version of my current self while hiding the loneliness that had driven me to online dating in the first place. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Would you have agreed to meet me if I had? The honest answer is no, probably not. The shock would have been too great, the risk too high. I might have blocked his profile and spent the rest of my life wondering what he wanted to say. "I needed to see you first," he continues, "to see if there was still anything, even just friendship, even just closure." And is there? The question slips out before I can stop it, vulnerable and loaded with decades of unfinished business. He's quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the candlelight. When he speaks, his voice is soft but certain. Oh, Maggie, there's everything. The restaurant has grown quieter around us, the dinner rush winding down as couples finish their meals and drift toward their cars. We've been sitting here for over an hour, barely touching our food, completely absorbed in the impossible task of bridging nearly 5 decades in a single evening. I need some air, I say suddenly, the weight of revelation pressing against my chest. It's a lot. Of course, he stands when I do, that old-fashioned courtesy still intact after all these years. The patio? We step outside onto the restaurant's small deck, decorated with more tiny lights and a few scattered tables. The October air is crisp but not cold, carrying the scent of approaching winter and someone's backyard fire pit. I wrap my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and lean against the railing, looking out at the parking lot where my Honda sits, next to what I assume is Bobby's car, a practical gray sedan that somehow seems exactly right for the man he's become. I need you to understand something, I say without looking at him. I'm not the same person you knew. I'm not 22 and heartbroken and waiting for you to come back. I know that. Do you? I turn to face him. Because I built a good life after you left, a full life. I raised 2 children, had a career I was proud of, traveled with my husband, became a grandmother. I grieved when Frank died, but I also learned to live alone, to be alone. I don't need rescuing anymore, Bobby. He nods slowly, and I see something like respect in his expression. I'm not the same person either, Maggie. I'm not that confused, angry boy who ran away instead of fighting for what mattered. I've done the work, therapy, AA, years of learning how to be a decent human being. I'm not here to rescue you or be rescued. I'm here because, he pauses, choosing his words carefully, because some connections transcend time. Because 48 years later, you're still the person I think about when I hear Marvin Gaye on the radio. Despite everything, I smile at that. Let's Get It On was our song. Still is, apparently. His answering smile is tentative but warm. My brain knows it's been nearly 50 years. My heart keeps insisting it was yesterday. A young couple emerges from the restaurant, laughing about something, their arms linked as they walk toward their car. They look so certain, so sure of their place in each other's lives. I remember feeling that way once, with Bobby, and later with Frank, in a different but equally real way. What do we do with this? I ask, gesturing vaguely between us. What do we do with whatever this is? I don't know, he admits. I hoped we could figure it out together. Maybe start with friendship? See where it goes? I live in assisted living now, I tell him, though I'm not sure why. Sunrise Manor. Not because I have to, but because I got tired of maintaining a house by myself. I have book club on Tuesdays and water aerobics on Thursdays, and I play bridge with 3 other widows who've become my closest friends. I have an apartment downtown, he offers, above the music store on Main Street. I give piano lessons to kids and sometimes play at the Methodist Church on Sundays. I have coffee every morning at the same diner and know all the regulars' names. We're describing our small, careful lives to each other, but underneath the mundane details, I hear something else. We're both still here. We've both survived loss and mistakes and the simple accumulation of years. We're both still capable of standing on a restaurant patio at 67 and 71 and feeling our hearts race over possibility. I'm scared, I admit, the words surprising me with their honesty. I'm scared of wanting something I might not be brave enough to have. Me too. He takes a step closer, close enough that I can smell his aftershave, different from what he used to wear, more mature, but somehow still distinctly him. But I'm more scared of walking away again, of spending whatever time I have left wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay. The patio door opens behind us and our server appears. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're closing the patio in a few minutes. Of course, I say, suddenly aware that we've been out here long enough for the restaurant to wind down around us. We should go. Bobby pays the check despite my protests, leaving a generous tip for the patient server who gave us space to navigate our impossible evening. We walk to our cars slowly, both of us reluctant to end this strange, overwhelming reunion. "Can I see you again?" he asks when we reach my Honda, not as Robert Martinez this time. Just as Bobby Reeves, who never stopped loving Margaret Patterson, even when he was too broken to do anything about it. The declaration hangs in the night air between us, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. I think about my quiet life at Sunrise Manor, the routines that keep me comfortable and safe. I think about Frank's memory and what he would want for me. I think about the girl I used to be, who believed in second chances and fairy tale endings. "Yes," I say, the word coming out stronger than I expected. "Yes, you can see me again." He smiles then, the full, genuine smile I remember from our teenage years, and for a moment the decades collapse completely. "Tomorrow's Sunday. Would you like to come hear me play at the Methodist Church and maybe have lunch after?" "I'd like that very much." We stand there for another moment, neither quite ready to leave, both of us probably wondering if this entire evening has been some elaborate dream. Finally, Bobby leans forward and kisses my cheek, soft and brief and sweet. "Good night, Maggie." "Good night, Bobby." I drive home through the familiar streets of our small town, past the high school where we fell in love, past the diner where Frank proposed, past all the landmarks of a life I've built and rebuilt and learned to live with contentment, if not always joy. But tonight, for the first time in years, contentment doesn't feel like enough. Back in my apartment at Sunrise Manor, I sit on my small sofa and replay every moment of the evening. The shock of recognition, the weight of his story, the impossible feeling of time folding in on itself. I should be exhausted, overwhelmed, but instead I feel energized in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number, though I somehow know it's him. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us another chance." I save the number in my contacts, typing Bobby Reeves for the first time in nearly 50 years. Then I respond, "Thank you for finding me. See you tomorrow." I place the phone on my nightstand and get ready for bed, going through the same routine I've followed for 5 years of widowhood. But tonight, as I brush my teeth and wash my face and put on the sensible nightgown that no one sees but me, I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror and see something different. I see possibility. I see a woman who's lived long enough to know that love doesn't always come when you're young and beautiful and sure of yourself. Sometimes it comes when you're weathered and careful, when you've learned that the heart can break and heal and break again and still, somehow, remain open to wonder. Sometimes it comes back. As I turn off the lights and settle into bed, I think about tomorrow's church service, about sitting beside Bobby as he plays hymns on the piano, about sharing lunch and conversation, and the strange gift of recognizing yourself in someone else's eyes after all these years. I think about Caroline and what I'll tell her about tonight, about my bridge partners and their inevitable questions, about all the practical considerations that come with letting someone new into a life I've spent years organizing around solitude. But mostly, I think about the way Bobby's voice cracked when he said my name, the way 48 years collapsed into nothing when he smiled. I think about second chances and the courage it takes to believe in them. I think about love at 67, patient and grateful and unafraid of time's passage because it has learned that time is precious precisely because it's finite. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I fall asleep smiling. The Methodist Church on Elm Street hasn't changed much since I attended services here as a child, dragged along by my grandmother every Sunday in my scratchy tights and patent leather shoes. The same wooden pews, The same stained glass windows depicting biblical scenes in jeweled colors, the same sense of quiet reverence that settles over a space designed for contemplation and prayer. But this morning, sitting in the third row as Bobby plays the opening hymn, everything feels transformed by context. His hands move across the keys with the same confidence I remember from high school when he'd play for me on the old upright piano in his parents' living room. But there's a depth to his touch now, a gravity that speaks of years spent learning to find peace in music when words weren't enough. Amazing grace fills the sanctuary, and I find myself watching his profile as he plays, noting the new lines around his eyes, the careful way he holds his shoulders. He's dressed in a navy suit that looks well cared for, but not expensive, and his gray hair is combed neatly back from his forehead. He looks like what he is, a man who has learned to take up appropriate space in the world, no more and no less than he deserves. The congregation joins in for the second verse, voices lifting in harmony that reminds me why people gather in places like this, not just for belief, but for the comfort of shared purpose, shared humanity. I sing along, surprised by how easily the words come back after years of sporadic church attendance, my voice blending with the others while my eyes remained fixed on the man at the piano. When the hymn ends, Bobby looks up and finds me in the crowd. His smile is quick, private, meant just for me, and I feel something flutter in my chest that has nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with recognition. Not just of him, but of myself, the part of me that responds to music and beauty and the simple gift of being seen by someone who once knew me better than I knew myself. Reverend Williams begins the sermon, something about renewal and second chances that feels almost comically appropriate given last night's revelations. I try to pay attention, but my mind keeps drifting to practical concerns. What will I tell my children about Bobby's reappearance? How do we navigate the awkwardness of explaining a relationship that technically ended before most people in this congregation were born? What does dating look like at our age, with our histories, our careful routines, our accumulated understanding of how much life can cost? Bobby plays again during the offering, a gentle instrumental version of In the Garden that makes me think of my grandmother's backyard, where she taught me to identify flowers and pull weeds and appreciate the patience required to grow anything worthwhile. I wonder if that's what we're doing now, tending something that was planted long ago, seeing if it can still bloom after decades of dormancy. After the service, I wait in the vestibule while Bobby puts away his sheet music and accepts compliments from other congregants. Several people approach me with friendly curiosity. I'm clearly not a regular here, and small towns notice such things. "You're Margaret Patterson, aren't you?" asks a woman about my age with silver hair and kind eyes. "Your daughter Caroline was in my son's class at Roosevelt High." "Yes, that's right. Linda Morrison?" "Linda Webb now, but yes, it's so nice to see you here. Are you visiting?" "Sort of," I say, glancing toward Bobby, who's still surrounded by well-wishers. "I'm here with Bobby Reeves. We're old friends." Linda follows my gaze and raises her eyebrows slightly. "Bobby's a treasure. He's been playing for us for about 3 years now. Such a gift with music." She pauses, and I can practically see the wheels turning in her mind, connecting dots and remembering high school gossip from 50 years ago. "Old friends, you said?" "Very old," I confirm, leaving it at that. Bobby appears at my elbow, having extricated himself from the small crowd. "Ready for lunch?" More than ready. We say our goodbyes to Linda and several other people whose faces I recognize, but whose names have drifted away with time. As we walk toward the parking lot, Bobby asks, "How was it, hearing me play again?" "Strange," I answer honestly, "but good strange. You've gotten better." "Lots of practice. Music became essential, I guess, when I was getting sober, when I was learning to live with myself again." He opens my car door for me, another old-fashioned gesture that makes me smile. "Follow me to Rosie's? Same place, just under new management now." Rosie's Cafe has indeed changed hands since the days when we used to share chocolate milkshakes there after school dances. The decor is more modern, all clean lines and industrial fixtures, but the booths are still red vinyl, and the menu still features the same comfort food that has sustained this town for decades. We settle into a corner booth, and I'm struck by how natural this feels, despite the surreal circumstances. Maybe that's what happens when you've lived long enough. Even the extraordinary becomes manageable, just another experience to be absorbed and integrated into the ongoing story of who you are. "Tell me about your children," Bobby says after we've ordered. "I know you have two from your dating profile." Carolyn and Michael. Carolyn's 42, lives in Denver with her husband and twin boys. She's an accountant, very practical, very protective of her mother's welfare. I smile, thinking of how Carolyn would react if she could see me right now. Michael's 38, just got remarried last year. He's a teacher here in town, middle school history. Do they know about me? I mean, did you ever? I told them I had a serious boyfriend in high school who went to Vietnam. They know you existed, but not, I wave my hand, trying to encompass the complexity of what we once meant to each other. And Frank, did he know? It's a fair question, one I've been asking myself since last night. Frank knew there was someone before him. He was secure enough not to ask for details, and I was grateful enough for his love not to volunteer them. I pause, considering how much to share. But yes, I think he knew you mattered. Maybe not how much, but that you did. Our food arrives. Grilled cheese and tomato soup for me, a club sandwich for him. Simple, unpretentious choices that reflect who we've become. People who no longer need to impress anyone, who can find satisfaction in basic pleasures. What about you? I ask. Tell me about your marriages. Bobby sighs, setting down his sandwich. Susan was first. I met her in Seattle in the 80s. She was a nurse, very patient with my moods, my drinking, but patience has limits, and I found hers. He shakes his head. The divorce was ugly. I wasn't a good person then, Maggie, not even close. And the second? Diana. That was in the 90s, after I'd gotten somewhat better, but not yet well. She had 2 kids from her first marriage, and I thought maybe being a stepfather would give me purpose, direction. He laughs, but there's no humor in it. Turns out you can't fix yourself by taking on someone else's responsibilities. That marriage lasted 3 years. I'm sorry. Don't be. They were both good women who deserved better than what I could give them then. I hope they found it. He takes a bite of his sandwich, chews thoughtfully. What about you? Was he enough? It's an intimate question, the kind that assumes a level of honesty we haven't earned yet, but somehow deserve after everything we've shared. I consider deflecting, but something about the way he asks, not jealous or possessive, just genuinely curious about my happiness, makes me want to answer truthfully. Yes, I say, he was enough, different from what I felt for you, but enough. We built something solid together, something that sustained both of us through raising kids and career pressures and his cancer diagnosis and treatment. It wasn't passionate exactly, but it was deep, reliable. I'm glad, Bobby says, and I believe he means it. I spent years hoping you'd found that kind of love. We eat in comfortable silence for a while, processing the weight of these confessions. Around us, the cafe fills with the after-church crowd, families with small children, elderly couples reading different sections of the newspaper, teenagers slouched in booths and trying to look sophisticated while ordering pancakes. Can I ask you something difficult? I say eventually. Of course. Why now? I mean, really, why now? You said you've been sober for 15 years, that you started looking for me then. That's a long time to carry hope without any encouragement. Bobby sets down his coffee cup and meets my eyes. Because I'm 71 years old, and I finally learned the difference between wanting something and needing it. For most of my adult life, I wanted things that weren't good for me. Alcohol, chaos, relationships that let me avoid looking too closely at myself. He pauses. But you, I've never stopped needing you, Maggie. Not the fantasy of you, but the real you. The person who knew me before I got broken, who might remember who I was capable of being. The honesty of it takes my breath away. I think of the careful way I've constructed my life since Frank's death. Predictable, safe, small enough to manage without risking too much disappointment. It's been a good life, a necessary one, but suddenly it feels insufficient in the face of Bobby's willingness to risk everything on the possibility of connection. I need to ask you something too, I say, and I need you to be completely honest. All right? Are you dying? The question comes out more bluntly than I intended, but I need to know. Is this some kind of bucket list thing, tying up loose ends because you're running out of time? He laughs, genuinely this time. No, I'm not dying. At least no more than anyone else our age is dying. I had a physical last month, blood pressure's a little high, knees creak when it rains, but the doctor says I'm good for another decade or two if I keep taking my vitamins and don't start drinking again. Good. I'm surprised by how relieved I feel, because I can't handle another man dying on me. Not yet. Understood. He reaches across the table and covers my hand with his, the first real touch we've shared since his kiss on my cheek last night. His skin is warm, spotted with age, but still familiar. For what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. I've spent too many years running away from things that mattered. We sit there with his hand over mine, two old people in a small-town cafe, probably looking to outside observers like exactly what we are, longtime companions sharing a quiet Sunday lunch. The ordinariness of it makes me want to laugh and cry simultaneously. So what do we do now? I ask. How do we date, I guess, at our age, with our history? Carefully, he says. Honestly, with the understanding that we're not trying to recapture what we had 50 years ago, but seeing if we can build something new with who we've become. I have book club Tuesday night. I have piano lessons Wednesday afternoon. Caroline calls every Thursday evening. I volunteer at the food bank Friday mornings. We're cataloging our commitments, the small obligations that structure our days and give them meaning. But underneath the practical details, I hear us negotiating something larger, how to fit each other into lives we've learned to live independently, how to risk interdependence after years of hard-won self-sufficiency. Saturday, I say finally, am free Saturday. So am I. His smile is soft, hopeful. Dinner? Something more ambitious than church and lunch? I'd like that. We finish our meal and walk out into the crisp October afternoon. The trees along Main Street are showing their colors, brilliant reds and golds that make the familiar landscape look freshly painted. Bobby walks me to my car, and we stand there for a moment in the pale sunlight, neither quite ready to separate. Thank you for today, I say, for the music, for lunch, for this. Thank you for coming, for giving us a chance to see what this might be. He kisses my cheek again, the same gentle gesture as last night, but today it feels less like goodbye and more like a promise. As I drive back to Sunrise Manor, I find myself humming Amazing Grace, the melody weaving through my thoughts like a prayer. Back in my apartment, I call Caroline in Denver. It's our usual Sunday call, but today I have news that will require careful handling. Hi, Mom, how was your week? Eventful, I say, settling into my favorite chair by the window. I had dinner last night, a date. There's a pause. Caroline has been gently encouraging me to get out there for months, but I think she's surprised that I actually followed through. That's wonderful. How was it? Tell me everything. I search for words that won't send my practical daughter into protective overdrive. Complicated. The man I met turned out to be someone I knew a long time ago, before your father. Someone from high school? Yes, Bobby Reeves. We dated senior year, and he went to Vietnam right after graduation. I hadn't seen him since 1974. Another pause, longer this time. I can practically hear Caroline processing this information, her accountant's mind calculating the implications and potential risks. Mom, wow. How did he find you? Online dating, apparently. He recognized my profile but didn't tell me who he was until we met. I stand up and walk to the window, watching residents of Sunrise Manor take their afternoon walks around the grounds. I know how it sounds, honey. I know it seems crazy. It doesn't sound crazy, Caroline says carefully. It sounds surprising. Are you okay? I mean, seeing him again after all these years must have been emotional. It was. It is. I lean my forehead against the cool glass. I'm seeing him again Saturday. Do you want to, or do you feel obligated because of the history? This is why I love my daughter. Even when she's worried, she asks the right questions. I want to. That's what scares me. We talk for another 20 minutes, Caroline probing gently for details, while I try to explain something I don't fully understand myself. How do you describe the feeling of time collapsing, of recognizing yourself in someone else's story after decades of believing that chapter of your life was permanently closed? Just be careful, Mom, she says finally. Not because I don't trust your judgment, but because, well, people can change a lot in 50 years. Make sure you're seeing who he is now, not who he was then. I will, I promise. After we hang up, I sit in the gathering dusk of my small apartment and think about Caroline's warning. She's right, of course. The Bobby I knew in high school might be completely gone, replaced by a stranger wearing his face and voice. But then I remember the way he looked at me across the restaurant table, the careful honesty of his confessions, the gentleness in his touch when he covered my hand with his own. Some things change, some things endure. The week passes in a strange suspension of normalcy, punctuated by moments of surreal awareness. I go to book club Tuesday night and find myself distracted during our discussion of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, thinking about the ways people reinvent themselves across decades, the stories we tell ourselves about love and loss, and the courage required for second chances. Wednesday, I get my hair done at the salon where I've been going for 15 years. Dolores, my stylist, notices immediately that something's different. "You're glowing," she says, running her fingers through my freshly washed hair. "What's his name?" "How do you know there's a he?" "Honey, I've been doing hair for 35 years. I know the look." She starts cutting, her scissors moving in practiced rhythm. So, spill. I tell her an abbreviated version of the story, focusing on the reunion aspect rather than the dating website deception. Dolores listens with the focused attention that good hairdressers perfect, making encouraging noises at all the right moments. "First love," she says when I finish. "That's powerful stuff, like a drug almost. You never forget your first hit." "It's been almost 50 years, Dolores. I'm not the same person. Neither is he, probably. But the core of what you felt for each other, that doesn't just disappear." She pauses in her cutting to meet my eyes in the mirror. "Question is, what do you want to do about it?" "I don't know. See what happens, I guess. Take it slow." "Good plan. At our age, slow is smart." She resumes cutting. "But don't be so careful that you miss out on something wonderful. Life's short, even when you've been living it as long as we have." Thursday evening, Caroline calls as promised, but this time Michael is with her. They've clearly coordinated to present a united front of concerned adult children. "Mom," Michael says without preamble, "Caroline told me about your date. Are you sure this guy is on the up and up?" "Hello to you too, sweetheart." I settle into my chair, preparing for the interrogation I knew was coming. And yes, I'm sure. Bobby's not some internet scammer or con artist. He's exactly who he says he is. "But you hadn't seen him in 50 years, Caroline," interjects. "People change, Mom. What if he's not stable? What if he's looking for someone to take care of him? What if he's just a lonely man who made some mistakes when he was young and has spent the last 15 years trying to become someone worthy of a second chance?" I counter. What if I'm a grown woman capable of making decisions about my own life? There's silence on the line. I rarely push back this firmly, preferring to let my children fuss over me within reasonable limits. But something about their assumption that I need protection from my own choices irritates me more than usual. We're not trying to control you, Michael says finally. We just worry. You've been alone for 5 years, and now suddenly I might not be alone anymore, and that scares you more than it scares me, I finish. I understand, really, but I need you both to trust that I'm not going to do anything foolish. I'm not moving in with him tomorrow. I'm not signing over my bank account. I'm having dinner with someone I once cared about very much to see if we can build a friendship as the people we are now. We talk for another few minutes, the conversation gradually warming as my children realize I'm not going to be talked out of this. They love me, I know that, but they've gotten comfortable thinking of me as their responsibility rather than as a woman with her own desires and agency. Saturday arrives gray and drizzly, the kind of October day that makes you want to stay inside with a book and a cup of tea. But I'm determined not to let the weather dampen my mood as I get ready for dinner with Bobby. We're going to Chez Laurent, the fanciest restaurant in town, not because we need to impress each other, but because we've earned the right to celebrate this strange gift of reconnection with something special. I choose a dress I bought for Frank's funeral and have never worn since. Navy blue with small silver buttons, sophisticated without being overly formal. With my pearl earrings and the good shoes that don't hurt my feet, I look like a woman preparing for an important evening, which, I suppose, I am. Bobby picks me up at 6:30, arriving at my door with a small bouquet of chrysanthemums in fall colors. The gesture is sweet and slightly old-fashioned, exactly right for the occasion. "You look beautiful," he says, and I believe he means it. He's wearing a charcoal gray suit with a tie that brings out his eyes, and his silver hair is combed back in a way that emphasizes the strong line of his jaw. "You look pretty handsome yourself." Chez Laurent is dimly lit and intimate, with real tablecloths and fresh flowers on every table. The maitre d' leads us to a quiet corner where we can talk without being overheard, and I'm grateful for the privacy. Tonight feels important in a way that our previous meetings haven't, less about reconciling the past and more about exploring the possibility of a future. We order wine, a bottle of Cabernet that we'll probably not finish, but that feels appropriate to the occasion. When it arrives, Bobby raises his glass in a toast. "To second chances," he says. "To being brave enough to take them," I reply. The wine is rich and smooth, and I feel it relax something in my shoulders that I didn't realize was tense. We order our food, salmon for me, beef tenderloin for him, and settle into the kind of conversation that feels both familiar and entirely new. "I've been thinking about what you said last week," Bobby begins, "about being scared of wanting something you might not be brave enough to have. And I think I understand now. It's not just about us, is it? It's about admitting that the life you've built for yourself isn't complete, that there's still room for something more." I nod, surprised by how clearly has articulated something I've been struggling to name. I've worked so hard to be content with what I have. My apartment, my routines, my independence. It feels almost greedy to want more. "Or maybe it feels dangerous," he suggests. "Safe is comfortable, known. Wanting more means risking what you already have for something that might not work out." Our food arrives, beautifully presented and aromatic, but I barely notice the salmon on my plate. This conversation feels more nourishing than any meal could be. "Tell me about your life now," I say. "Really tell me. Not just the facts, but what it feels like." Bobby sets down his fork and considers the question seriously. "Quiet," he says finally. "Peaceful, mostly. I wake up early, make coffee, read the paper. I practice piano for an hour before breakfast. My students come in the afternoons, mostly kids whose parents think music lessons will make them more well-rounded." He smiles. Some of them actually have talent, some just have patience. Both are valuable. Do you ever get lonely? Often. But loneliness and being alone aren't the same thing. I've learned to live with my own company, to find satisfaction in small things. A perfect cup of coffee, a piece of music played well, the way the light hits my apartment windows at sunset. He pauses. But yes, I miss having someone to share those moments with, someone who understands their significance. I think about my own small pleasures, the satisfaction of a well-organized bookshelf, the first daffodils in the assisted living community's garden, the way my grandson's laughter sounds over the phone. Beautiful moments made somehow incomplete by the lack of witness, the absence of someone who cares that I notice them. I miss being known, I admit, really known, not just recognized. Frank knew me that way, but it took years to build that understanding. The thought of starting over, of teaching someone new how to love me, I shake my head.
But it seems exhausting. But I already know how to love you, Bobby, says quietly. Maybe not the woman you've become, but the heart of who you are. That hasn't changed, Maggie. I recognized it the moment I saw you in the restaurant. The statement hangs between us, honest and vulnerable and terrifying in its implications. Because if he's right, if some essential part of me remains unchanged after nearly 5 decades of living, then maybe the connection we're feeling isn't just nostalgia or wishful thinking. Maybe it's recognition of something that never really ended, just went dormant, waiting for the right conditions to bloom again. What are we doing, Bobby? I ask. What is this, really? He reaches across the table and takes my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine in a gesture that feels both natural and miraculous. I think we're falling in love again, or maybe continuing to fall in love, if love is something that doesn't really stop once it starts, just changes shape over time. The words should frighten me, should send me running back to the safety of my carefully constructed solitude. Instead, they settle into my chest, like something I've been waiting to hear without knowing I was waiting. I'm 71 years old, he continues. I have arthritis in my hands, I take medication for my blood pressure, and I sometimes forget people's names mid-conversation. I'm not the boy you fell in love with in high school. And I'm 67, with gray hair and reading glasses and a tendency to fall asleep during movies, I reply. I'm not that girl either. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we get to love each other as who we really are, not who we were or who we thought we should become. Maybe this is better because it's built on truth instead of possibility. I squeeze his hand, feeling the calluses from decades of piano playing, the slight tremor that comes with age, the warmth that speaks of life still being lived fully. It terrifies me, I admit. It should. Anything worth having should be a little terrifying. We finish dinner slowly, reluctant to end this moment of honesty and connection. The restaurant gradually empties around us, other couples drifting toward their cars and their own small dramas of the heart. When we finally ask for the check, I realize we've been here for nearly 3 hours, completely absorbed in the process of discovering each other again. Bobby drives me home through streets made shiny by the earlier rain, the car filled with comfortable silence and the lingering warmth of wine and confession. When we pull into the parking lot at Sunrise Manor, neither of us moves to get out immediately. I know this is moving fast, he says, staring through the windshield at the building where I've made my safe, small life. 50 years of separation and then 3 dates in a week. We don't have to rush anything. But we don't have unlimited time either, I point out. At our age, taking it slow could mean missing our chance entirely. He turns to look at me, his face serious in the dim light from the parking lot lamps. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to waste whatever time we have left being cautious. I'm saying I want to see where this goes, even if it scares me, especially if it scares me. Bobby smiles then, the full, joyous smile I remember from our youth, but rarely saw during our recent reunions. In that case, would you like to have breakfast tomorrow? There's someone I'd like you to meet. Who? My sponsor from AA. His name is Ed, and he's been listening to me talk about the woman I never got over for about 10 years now. I think he'd like to put a face to the story. The request surprises me with its implications. Meeting his sponsor means acknowledging that this is serious, that we're not just indulging in nostalgia, but building something real and present. It means stepping further into Bobby's current life instead of just revisiting our shared past. I like that, I say, and realize I mean it completely. He walks me to the door of my building, and when we reach the entrance, he stops and turns to face me. Maggie, he says, my name soft in his mouth like a prayer. I need you to know something. What? I'm not here to complete you or fix anything that's broken in your life. You're whole already, I can see that. But I'm here because I think we could be extraordinary together. Not perfect, not without challenges, but extraordinary in the way that matters. Before I can respond, he leans down and kisses me. Not on the cheek this time, but properly, his lips gentle and sure against mine. It's brief, chaste by any standard, but it carries the weight of 48 years of separation and the promise of however many years we might have left to discover what we could become together. When we part, I feel dizzy with possibility and wine and the simple miracle of being kissed at 67 by a man who once knew me better than I knew myself. Good night, Maggie. Good night, Bobby. I watch him drive away, then take the elevator to my floor and let myself into my apartment. The space feels different somehow, not smaller or insufficient, but like a launching pad rather than a hiding place. I get ready for bed slowly, savoring the taste of good wine and the lingering warmth of Bobby's kiss, the sense that my carefully ordered life is about to expand in ways I never imagined possible. Before I turn off the light, I call Caroline in Denver. It's later than I usually call, but she answers on the second ring. Mom, is everything okay? Everything is wonderful, I say, and hear the truth of it in my own voice. I just wanted to tell you that I'm happy, really happy, and I know that might worry you, but I need you to be happy for me too. There's a pause, and when Caroline speaks, her voice is soft with understanding. I am happy for you, Mom, maybe a little scared too, but mostly happy. You deserve this. Thank you for saying that. Will you tell me about it? The dinner, I mean, how it went? So I do. I tell her about the restaurant and the wine and the conversation that lasted 3 hours. I tell her about feeling recognized and understood and brave enough to want something more than contentment. I don't tell her about the kiss. Some moments are too precious and private to share, even with the daughter who loves you most in the world. When we hang up, I lie in bed listening to the familiar sounds of Sunrise Manor settling into evening quiet. The hum of the heating system, the distant murmur of television through thin walls, the occasional footsteps in the hallway. These sounds have been the soundtrack to my solitude for 5 years, comforting in their predictability. But tonight, they feel like a lullaby sung to the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. Tonight, I fall asleep not just smiling, but planning, imagining breakfast with Bobby and his sponsor, thinking about how to introduce this impossible story to my son Michael, wondering what it will feel like to walk through the world again as half of a pair, instead of a complete and careful whole. Tonight, for the first time in longer than I can remember, I dream about the future instead of the past. Sunday morning arrives bright and clear, the kind of October day that makes you grateful to be alive and witness to the changing seasons. I wake earlier than usual, energized by anticipation and the strange sense that everything in my life is about to shift in wonderful and terrifying ways. I dress carefully for breakfast, not formal, but thoughtful. A soft sweater and forest green that Frank always said brought out my eyes. Comfortable slacks, the gold bracelet my children gave me for my 60th birthday. Meeting Bobby's sponsor feels like a milestone, an introduction to the community that has supported his transformation from the broken young man who left me to the gentle, honest man who found me again. Bobby picks me up at 9, and I notice immediately that he seems more relaxed than during our previous dates. There's an easiness in his manner, a settled confidence that suggests he slept well and woke up certain about the choices he's making. "How are you feeling about this?" he asks as we drive toward downtown. "Nervous, I admit, but good nervous. Tell me about Ed." He's 75, retired electrician, been sober for 23 years, lost his wife to cancer about 5 years ago, but he's the strongest person I know. He'll probably ask you direct questions. That's his way. Don't take it personally. "What kind of questions?" Bobby grins, the kind designed to figure out if you're going to break my heart again. The comment should sting, but it doesn't. There's too much affection in his voice, too much understanding that the heartbreaking we did to each other 48 years ago was mutual and complicated and born of circumstances neither of us knew how to handle. We meet Ed at a small diner called Murphy's, the kind of place that serves enormous breakfasts to working people and retirees with time to linger over coffee and conversation. Ed is already seated in a corner booth, a tall man with weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug, his gray beard neatly trimmed and his eyes sharp with intelligence and warmth. "So, you're Maggie," he says as we approach, standing to shake my hand with a grip that's firm but not aggressive. "Bobby's told me enough stories about you that I feel like we've met before." "All good stories, I hope." "The important ones are," Ed replies, and I like him immediately. We settle into the booth and Ed signals the waitress for more coffee. There's something ceremonial about this meeting, I realize. Not just a social introduction, but Bobby presenting me to the person who has helped him rebuild his life, seeking approval or at least acceptance from the community that supported his recovery. So Ed says once we've ordered our food, Bobby tells me you two have quite a history. We do, though most of it is ancient history at this point. Ancient history has a way of becoming current events when you're not paying attention. Ed's eyes move between Bobby and me with the practiced assessment of someone who has spent decades helping people untangle the complicated relationships between past and present. "How are you handling the shock of all this?" It's exactly the kind of direct question Bobby warned me about, but I appreciate the straightforwardness. Ed isn't making small talk. He's trying to understand whether I'm equipped to handle whatever this relationship might become. "I'm handling it by taking it one day at a time," I say, by trying to see Bobby as who he is now, not just who he was when I knew him before, and by being honest about what I can and can't offer at this stage of my life. Which is? I glance at Bobby, who nods encouragingly. I can offer friendship, companionship, someone to share meals and conversation with. I can offer affection, and probably love if we get there. I can't offer endless patience for old patterns or drama. I can't offer to fix anyone or be fixed by anyone. I'm too old for that kind of relationship. Ed nods approvingly. "And what do you want from him?" "The same things I'm offering, plus honesty about where he is in his recovery, in his life. I need to know that if we do this, we're doing it as equals, not as rescuer and rescued." Our food arrives, stacks of pancakes and eggs and bacon that seem designed for people who do physical labor rather than retired seniors navigating late-life romance. But the generous portions feel appropriate somehow, a symbol of abundance and possibility. "Bobby's been sober for 15 years, Ed says, cutting into his eggs. That's not nothing, but it's also not everything. Recovery is a daily choice, and relationships can be triggers for all kinds of old patterns." I understand that. Do you? Because from what he's told me, you were his first real love, the person he left behind when he couldn't get his act together. That's heavy emotional territory. I look at Bobby, who's listening to this conversation with the kind of focused attention that suggests he's heard similar warnings before. What does that mean for us, practically? It means we go slow, Bobby answers. It means I keep going to meetings, keep checking in with Ed, keep being honest about how I'm handling things. It means if I start to slip back into old patterns, isolation, resentment, using our relationship to avoid dealing with my own stuff, you call me on it. And if I start to slip into old patterns, trying to fix you, making excuses for behavior I shouldn't tolerate, losing myself in someone else's story, then I call you on it, he says simply. Ed smiles for the first time since we sat down. Now you're talking like adults, like people who have learned something from their mistakes. We eat and talk for another hour, the conversation ranging from practical concerns to shared memories to hopes for whatever comes next. Ed tells stories about his own late-life love, a woman he met at a grief support group 2 years after his wife died, who became his companion for the last 3 years of her life before she succumbed to the same cancer that had taken his wife. People think love gets simpler when you're older, he says, reaching for the check despite Bobby's protests. Truth is, it gets more complicated in some ways, more fragile because you know how easily it can be lost, but also more precious because you know how rare it is to find. When we part ways in the parking lot, Ed shakes my hand again and looks me directly in the eyes. Take care of each other, he says, and don't let the fear of losing what you found keep you from enjoying what you have. Bobby drives me home in comfortable silence, both of us processing the weight of Ed's blessing and the reality that we've officially graduated from catching up with the past to building something for the future. When we reach Sunrise Manor, he walks me to the door but doesn't come up. Thank you for meeting Ed, he says. It mattered to me that he approve of you. Did he? Completely. He told me while you were in the restroom that you're exactly what he hoped you'd be. Strong enough to stand up to me, smart enough not to enable me, and brave enough to risk your heart on someone who once broke it. The assessment is both flattering and sobering. And what do you think? Bobby cups my face in his hands, his thumbs gentle against my cheekbones. I think I'm falling in love with you all over again, not with who you were, but with who you are. And I think if we're careful and honest and lucky, we might have something extraordinary. He kisses me again, longer this time, with the confidence of someone who has permission to love and be loved in return. When we part, I feel breathless and 17 and 67 all at once. Dinner Tuesday? He asks. Dinner Tuesday, I agree. As I watch him drive away, I think about Ed's words. Don't let the fear of losing what you found keep you from enjoying what you have. It's advice that applies to more than just romance. It's a philosophy for living at any age, but especially at ours, when time feels both abundant and precious, when every day is a gift, but not necessarily a guarantee. Back in my apartment, I sit by the window and watch the residents of Sunrise Manor going about their Sunday routines. Couples walking hand in hand around the grounds, families visiting with elderly parents, solitary figures reading on benches in the autumn sunshine. For 5 years, I've been one of the solitary figures, content in my independence, proud of my ability to create meaning and purpose without relying on anyone else. Now, suddenly, I'm contemplating becoming half of a couple again, not because I need completion, but because I've rediscovered the joy of being truly known by another person, of sharing the small moments that make up a life, of having someone who cares whether I noticed the way the light looked this morning or how the music sounded at church. My phone rings, interrupting my reverie. It's Michael, my son, calling from across town where he's probably grading papers or preparing lessons for the week ahead. Hi, Mom. How was your week? Eventful, I say, the same word I used with Caroline last Sunday, though so much has changed since then. I had another date with Bobby, actually several dates. Several. Michael's voice carries the careful neutrality he uses when he's trying not to be overprotective. How did they go? Very well. Well enough that I think this might be something real. There's a pause, and I can picture Michael processing this information, weighing his concerns against his desire for my happiness. Are you sure you're ready for that? It's only been a week since you met him. But we have history, sweetheart. We're not starting from scratch. I stand up and move to the kitchen, needing something to do with my hands while we navigate this conversation. I know it seems fast, but at our age, fast might be the only option we have. I just don't want you to get hurt, I know, and I appreciate that you care enough to worry. But I also need you to understand that being hurt is a risk I'm willing to take if it means I might also be happy in a way I haven't been since your father died. Another pause. Then, tell me about him. Not the high school version, but who he is now. So I do. I tell Michael about Bobby's sobriety, his music, his quiet life above the music store. I tell him about Ed and the breakfast meeting, about the careful honesty Bobby brings to our conversations, about the way he seems to understand that we're not trying to recapture the past, but create something new with the people we've become. He sounds stable, Michael says finally. That's good. That's what you need at this point in your life. He is stable, but he's also alive, you know? He makes me feel alive in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. Then I'm happy for you, Mom. Cautiously happy, but happy. We talk for a few more minutes about ordinary things, his students, his wife's new job, plans for Thanksgiving, normal Sunday evening conversation between a mother and son, but underneath it, I hear acceptance, even support for the changes I'm choosing to make in my life. After we hang up, I prepare for bed with a sense of completion that has nothing to do with the end of the day and everything to do with the feeling that all the pieces of my life are finally arranging themselves into a new pattern. My children are worried but supportive. Bobby's sponsor has given his blessing. The practical concerns about dating at our age have been acknowledged and addressed. What remains is the simple, complicated business of learning to love again. Not the desperate, consuming love of youth, but the mature, intentional love of people who have lived long enough to understand its value and rarity. As I turn off the lights and settle into bed, I think about tomorrow's routine. Book club in the evening, but first a quiet day of reading and reflection, of preparing for whatever Tuesday's dinner with Bobby might bring. I think about the woman I was a week ago, content in her solitude and small pleasures, and the woman I'm becoming, brave enough to risk that contentment for the possibility of something greater. Both women are valid, both deserve respect and consideration, but only one of them gets to see what happens next, and tonight that feels like the most extraordinary gift of all. For the second night in a row, I fall asleep smiling, dreaming not of the past or the future, but of the present moment, this strange, wonderful now where love has returned to my life in a form I never expected but somehow always hoped for, where an old memory I had lost has come back alive, and with it, a future I thought was impossible.